I lost my daughter on October 12, 1993, a rainy Tuesday evening. She didn't die. In fact, she was at dinner that evening. But that night, she stopped calling me Dad. I'm going to tell you how to lose a child. I am 74 years old, and I want you to look at this jar. I spent 50 years as a structural engineer, worshiping precision. My entire life was calculated, controlled. That is why this jar doesn't belong here. The glass is a bit smudged. The label is a piece of torn masking tape, written in Sharpie. There is even a speck of dried mud on the lid. If this were a building inspection, I would have flagged this object as a defect. I would have removed it to maintain the integrity of the design. And that is exactly what I tried to do to the person who sent it to me. This jar came from my daughter, Sarah, and for 40 years I treated my own daughter like a structural defect that needed to be corrected. I have 2 children, and in my arrogance, I assigned them roles before they even learned to speak. My son David, he was the project. He was the one I saw myself in. I poured all my ambition, all my unfulfilled dreams, and all my father's harsh lessons into him. I sculpted him, I pushed him. I made sure he had the best grades, the best schools, the best career. And today, David is a wealthy, successful CEO in Silicon Valley who is currently divorcing his wife and hasn't had a genuine conversation with me for years. But Sarah? Sarah was different. Sarah was the invisible child. She didn't fit the blueprint. When she was little, while David was trying to build bridges with me, Sarah was in the garden talking to bugs. She was messy. She was emotional. She was wild. And to a man like me, a man who saw life as a grid of steel beams, she was terrifying. I didn't know how to calculate her load-bearing capacity. I didn't know how to predict her. So I did the only thing I knew how to do with things I couldn't control. I tried to fix her. I looked at my daughter not as a person to be known, but as a problem to be solved. I thought she was a weed in my perfectly manicured English garden. And what do you do with weeds? You spray them, you cut them back. You try to force them into a shape that pleases the eye. I remember when she was 7 years old. I came home and found her in my workshop. She had taken my expensive chisels, tools I didn't even let David touch, and she was carving a piece of driftwood she found by the river. She was covered in sawdust, her hair was a disaster, and she was singing to herself. Instead of seeing her creativity, I saw chaos. I took the tools away. I scolded her for making a mess. I told her, Sarah, young ladies don't play in the dirt. Go inside and practice your piano. Do something productive. I crushed that spark because it didn't look like success to me. I thought I was being a good father. I thought I was teaching her discipline. I didn't realize that by trying to fix her, I was actually breaking the bridge between us. I was pushing her away, inch by inch, year by year. I was teaching her the most dangerous lesson a parent can teach a child, that they are not acceptable as they are, that love is conditional on performance. I look at this jar now, and I realize it contains more sweetness than my entire career. But to understand the taste of this jam, you have to understand the bitterness I forced her to swallow. You have to understand the moment I lost her completely. It wasn't a big fight, just doors slamming. It was just that rainy Tuesday evening in 1993. The day I chose my job over my daughter's soul. Sarah was 8 years old. She had a piano recital. Now you have to understand, Sarah wasn't a performer. She was shy. She hated being looked at, but she had practiced this piece, some simple Mozart sonata, for 4 months. Every evening while I was reading the newspaper, I would hear the plink, plink, plink from the living room. She wanted to impress me. That's the tragedy of children, isn't it? They just want us to look at them. The morning of the recital, she grabbed my leg at the breakfast table. She looked up with those big, anxious eyes and said, "Daddy, you're coming, right? We're in the front row. I saved you a seat." I smiled. I patted her head. "Of course, Princess, I'll be there." I meant it. I really did. But at 4 p.m., a crisis happened at the firm. A client was threatening to pull a contract on a high-rise project. It was a matter of money. It was a matter of ego. And in my warped mind, it was an emergency. I told my secretary to call the house. Tell them I'm running late. I didn't run late. I missed it entirely. I arrived home at 8 p.m. The house was quiet. I walked into the kitchen expecting a tantrum. I expected tears. I was ready with my logical excuses. I was ready to say, "But Sarah, this meeting paid for your piano lessons." But there were no tears. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, eating cereal. She didn't look up when I walked in. Martha, my wife, looked at me with a disappointment so deep it felt like a physical blow. She told me what happened. She told me that Sarah had walked onto that stage, a tiny figure in a velvet dress, and sat at the huge Steinway. Before she placed her hands on the keys, she looked out into the audience. She looked at the front row. She saw her mother, and right next to her mother, she saw the empty chair. She stared at that empty chair for 10 seconds. Martha said it felt like an hour, and then she played. She played perfectly. She didn't miss a note, but she played it mechanically. She played it like a machine. And when she finished, she didn't bow to the audience. She just stood up and walked off. That night I tried to apologize. I went to her room. I said, "Honey, I'm sorry, work was crazy." She looked at me. She was only 8, remember? And she said, "It's okay, Dad. I didn't need you to hear it anyway." She wasn't angry. She was indifferent. And that broke me, though I didn't know it yet. That was the moment my daughter decided she didn't need my applause to exist. She decided that if I wasn't going to be part of her world, she would build a world where I wasn't required. As she grew up, the gap became a canyon. Then came the late 90s. The silence that started at that piano recital turned into noise. She started wearing flannel shirts, 3 sizes too big. She wore ripped jeans. She stopped playing the piano and started listening to Nirvana. I hated it. I was a man of suits and ties. I looked at her and saw failure. One day she came down to dinner. She had taken a pair of scissors and cut her own hair in the bathroom sink. It was jagged, uneven, messy. I exploded. I didn't ask her why she did it. I didn't ask if she was hurting. I just shouted, "Look at yourself, you look like a hobo. How do you expect to find a husband looking like that? How do you expect to get a job?" I was worried about her market value. She was trying to find her identity. She looked at me with that same cold stare from the recital and said, "I'm not trying to find a husband, Dad. I'm trying to find myself. But you wouldn't understand that because you're just a suit." She was right. I was just a suit. She dropped out of college, fine arts, which I had already labeled as useless, and bought a backpack. She went to Europe. Then she moved to Oregon. She told us she was going to work on an organic farm. "Farming?" I scoffed. "My daughter, the Cornell legacy, is going to dig in the dirt?" I told Martha, "She's throwing her life away. She's lost." Thought my daughter was the failure of the family. I thought David, with his corner office and his Porsche, was the winner. I thought I had succeeded with one and failed with the other. I was so blind. I was looking at the wrong metrics. I was measuring their lives in dollars when I should have been measuring them in joy. And it took a death to make me see the life I had ignored. When my wife Martha died 4 years ago, my world collapsed. The structure I had spent a lifetime building, it didn't just crack, it pulverized. I was lost. I sat in this big house, alone, unable to function. My son David, the successful one, handled the funeral. He was efficient. He hired the best caterers. He dealt with the lawyers. He managed the estate. He treated his mother's death like a project to be managed. He was cold. He was distant. He was exactly what I had trained him to be. But he couldn't talk to me. We sat in the same room, 2 men in expensive suits, with absolutely nothing to say to each other. Sarah hadn't come to the funeral to manage things. She came to cry. She came to hold my hand. But after she went back to Oregon, the silence returned. Until a week later, I was sitting on the porch, staring at Martha's dead garden. The hydrangeas were dying. The tornado plants Martha loved were withered. I felt like dying with them. The phone rang. It was Sarah. I thought she was calling to ask for money. That's what I always thought. Or maybe they blamed me for something. Instead, she asked a question that saved my life. "Dad," she said. Her voice was hesitant. "I'm trying to plant a new variety of tomatoes here in Oregon, but the soil is too acidic. Nuvius would help Mom with the garden. How do I fix the pH balance?" I froze. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for advice on her career. For the first time in 20 years, my daughter needed me. Not the executive Thomas, not the wallet. She needed the man who knew how to mix lime into soil. We talked for an hour. We talked about dirt. We talked about compost. And in that hour, the ice between us began to melt. I started visiting her. I went to Oregon. I saw her life. She doesn't have a big house. She lives in a small farmhouse with her partner Mark, a carpenter. They don't have a stock portfolio. They don't have status. But I watched them. I watched how they laughed while cooking dinner. I watched how Sarah touched the plants with such tenderness, the same tenderness I rejected when she was a child. I watched her sleep with a peace I haven't felt in 50 years. And I realized the truth. David, my success, is miserable. He is rich, but he is spiritually bankrupt. Sarah, my failure, is the richest person I know. She broke the cycle. She rejected my toxic definition of success. She became a weed, yes, but she thrived. She put down roots in her own soil, not the concrete I tried to pour over her. This jam? It's blackberry. She picked the berries herself. She boiled them. She jarred them. She sent this to me not because she had to, but because she wanted to share her sweetness with a bitter old man. It tastes like freedom. If you are a parent watching this, please listen to me. Do not try to engineer your children. They are not bridges to be built. They are not code to be written. If your son wants to paint instead of code, let him paint. If your daughter wants to climb mountains instead of corporate ladders, buy her the boots. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you are 74 to realize that your problem child was actually the only one who figured out how to live. Sarah was the invisible child, but she was the only one who truly saw me. And in the end, she was the one who forgave me. My wife Martha told me to open the windows. Sarah is the fresh air that came in.